Welcome to Now for Someone Completely Interesting. My name is Ben Poulin. Well, my guest here with me is was one of the he was on the initial list of people that I wanted to bring on the show, but he also ticks the box as being my first guest who was recommended by a previous guest. And I'm pleased to welcome someone I've always had some great discussions with, a man who wears many hats in our community, Pierre Lamoureux. Welcome, Pierre.
Thank you, Ben. It's fun to be here.
Of course, it's I'm talking about our two-time guest, Les Parsons, who recommended not only you, but your wife, Joanne, as well, and for very good reason. And like I said, both of you I've had on my list. But you, family man, volunteer in the community, a lawyer, Scotch connoisseur.
Yeah, oh, well, I'm trying.
I'm almost overwhelmed of where to begin. So I always think the best place to start is let's start. I mean, every time we talk, something personal about you comes up and I was like, wow, that's fast. I didn't know that. That's fast. So let's start right at the beginning. Since I've moved to St. Paul, you've been a fixture in this community, and I can't really imagine the community without you and your family, but you're not from here.
No,
you grew up in Edmonton, correct?
That's right.
All right. So let's start there. Tell me a little about growing up in Edmonton.
I grew up, Ben, in one of the most stimulating places you can think of. I grew up on 96th Street in a little French community enclave right beside the Paroisse Immaculée Conception, which is a French language parish in the heart of Edmonton. And there was a little French community around the church. I went to school at École Sacré-Cœur, now and across from the Sacred Heart Church of the First Nations. Very multicultural, very multi-ethnic community. My friends were Italian and Portuguese, and we grew up in that kind of a stimulating environment.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, that explains a lot about how you're involved with a lot of facets. We'll maybe talk a little bit about that later. So growing up, so you went to, so it was a French school you went to?
Yeah, it was a bilingual school at that time.
Okay.
The French schools became a very important part of my life and my identity. But back then, the education system was a bilingual system. It was run by the staff were largely many sisters of the Assumption, les Sœurs de l'Assomption, very important in my upbringing. So we spoke French at school. We went to church we lived 2 houses from the church. And that's the kind of place I was raised in. And you know, Ben, since I've moved to St. Paul and became involved in the reconciliation movement, I can tell you that we were always aware of the Indigenous poverty in the city core. That was seen and experienced on the south side of the tracks, right? The proverbial tracks.
Absolutely.
We lived on the north side of the tracks in a very busy, happy kind of multicultural setting. But just down the street near the York Hotel and Boyle Street, that's the reality that I became more aware of in my life since moving to St. Paul.
Right. So it would have had a kind of a similar feel to what we have in St. Paul, because I know they proximity-wise we're close to, the Saddle Lake Reservation and everything like that. So we're kind of right involved with.
And you know, Ben, exactly, very similar, right? And I used to think, and in my upbringing, very traditional French Canadian Catholic upbringing, I was raised in a milieu where the French Canadian reality, we thought we were the forgotten nation. We were the lesser of the 2 founding nations. And, the old, I forget who coined the phrase, whether it was Pierre Burton or someone, we thought we were the silent nation. I forget the term escapes me. It'll come to me.
Right.
But the invisible nation, the silent, I remember what I'm trying to say is that we used to talk about the 2 solitudes in Canada, being the French and the English solitudes that never met, that never spoke. It seems very clear to me as we develop and as we evolve as a society that the 2 real solitudes in our country are the Indigenous and the non-Indigenous, whether it be settler or New Canadian communities. We still are not talking. I mean, 96th Street and the tracks south may have been a couple hundred miles away for the distance we felt culturally with Indigenous people. And I'm afraid to say in my community, in my home of St. Paul, Saddle Lake is still very far away from most of us,
Right.
including me.
But so near too. I'm just in my business with the car dealership and everything like that. Every day, that's our customers, that's our clientele. We talk to them every day. But yeah, there is a little bit of that. I guess that separation. We're not quite on the same.
I remember when we moved here. I remember the first boycott. There were a number of boycotts here, and my former partner Bill Lawrence, he did a great effort working with the Chamber of Commerce to understand and create dialogue. But it took the First Nations to have a boycott for people to become aware and to talk.
Right.
I think now we're moving in the right direction. The residential school and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission recommendations, calls to action, all of these things are getting us moving in the right direction. But we really have to engage in that, and we are as a nation talking about it, but it's taking time.
So. Like I said, you wear many hats. We're going to come back to that a little bit later because I think that's something that's quite important to you too, that you've mentioned many times in discussions. But let's go back just a little bit. And I thought this was a great little tidbit. We were, I'm doing my level checks here, and I was like, okay, I just want you talking naturally. So I said, "What's your favorite color?" Can you answer that one?
Oh, sure. It's blue, because ever since I was a little kid, blue was very special to me, because the sisters that taught me in grade school would reward us by having little stickers of angels and of the Virgin Mary, and that was a sign of accomplishment and success. And I was very fervent, raised in a very traditional, fervent Catholic household. So the Virgin Mary and the traditional color of blue was very important to me.
And see, this is why I wanted to bring you, because it's not just a simple answer.
Nothing is very simple, is it?
I guess not. So moving along, Kate, so you grew up in Edmonton school. As I mentioned, you're a lawyer. So obviously there's definitely an extensive post-secondary background, but lawyer was never really at the time, moving on, the end game. You went to university for something quite a bit different than being a lawyer. What did you initially go to university for?
I went to university, and this my actual journey started in high school. I remember picking up a philosophy book. It was a history of Plato's thought, and this was life-changing for me, Ben. I studied philosophy. I initially thought, well, I in my journey as a young Catholic, I thought, well, I understand I need to take philosophy if I am going to become a priest one day. So there's an option. I'll take a philosophy degree and see where that goes.
Right.
But I studied philosophy because I was drawn to this discipline that sits and simply talks about the meaning of things. The existence of God, whether we know anything, all of these questions that have become a little cliche, but it really launched me on my intellectual journey. I mean, I remember in high school, some of the Oblate fathers are very important in my education. Father Tom Bilodeau at the Campus Saint-Jean, another Oblate father, my philosophy mentor. I mean, we explored the philosophy of religion in particular, different subjects like the different proofs for the existence of God, and how do we approach that, and I mean the list goes on. So that's kind of traditional classic philosophy. When I pursued my philosophy degree into a specialized program, which was like hitting a wall, because I became aware that what most of us think of as philosophy are Plato, Aristotle, Descartes, all of these big classics, Kant. But the new trend, what has been a trend for maybe 50 years or so years, is in linguistic analysis. That was a whole other area for me, and the meaning, in other words, philosophy in the Anglo-American sphere is more about the use of language and how we can decode meaning in the use of language. So we're not looking for big ideas that try to explore theories of spiritual exist. So this was hard for me because I came from a very traditional Catholic background,
Right.
a life of faith. But the Anglo-American kind of secular philosophy was not about big ideas. It was about the use of language. But that served me as a transition into my professional life as a lawyer, because I spent a lot of years simply reading language and trying to understand how language works.
I guess that was going to be my next question. You kind of answered. How does it being in philosophy in any capacity translate into almost any vocation in that sense? So I guess if you were going to be a priest, obviously, right? But when you get into like what you said with the languages and stuff like that, like how that would apply. So that's something I never knew about, right? So why did you decide to become a lawyer then? Or what was that deciding factor?
Well, by the time I realized that priesthood was not going to be for me, because I was made to love my wife and to have a family.
Let's talk about that really quick then.
Yeah.
So your wife, like we talked about this before, and because her name came up when the recommendation with Les to have you on the podcast. You and your wife Joanne. Tell us a little bit about how you guys got to meet and got together. And
sure.
Let's not give away too much, because I think I have to have her on this podcast as well. So
well, Joanne we went to high school together.
Okay.
Yeah, and we were friends. And I used to tease Joanne because Joanne was a singer, a performer. Mm-hmm. When we started dating and knew we were going to marry, we thought, well, what do we do for a living? Joanne was a singer, performer, and we started singing and songwriting and performing in schools. That's what we did for 2 years.
Okay.
It was like a 2-year honeymoon. It was fantastic. But leading up to that, Joanne was very involved in the French community and culturally and performing arts. And so whenever she needed a French date, she called me. So I said, I'm your token French date. And so, and that's, we kind of got to know each other better, because we were always friends in high school. But when she needed a French guy to go to a performance of some kind, she would call me. And so we got to know each other a little bit that way, and then we decided to get married. And she's my partner. She's the love of my life.
There you go. All right, so back to I love the token Frenchman. Aren't we all sometimes? Okay, back to, so what steered you into law profession?
Well, we were set on having a family. We thought, well, performing arts and doing shows were fantastic. We did a musical history of French Canada, and then that kind of segues back into my life in St. Paul and the work I'm doing on the St. Paul des Métis project, Ben.
Right.
This is something that it's one story of realization after another. My eyes open, and then I say, was I really doing that then? Anyway, to come back to how the question was law.
Yeah.
How did I become?
How did you decide that
Gotcha.
was the direction you would go in?
Well, we decided, well, we're either going to continue performing when raising a family, or we could maybe do school material and production. But it sounded like we would need to raise our family out of a school bus for a while to tour, and so that wasn't our idea. We weren't raised that way. Was as a good, a healthy way of raising a family. So, my good friend Vital Ouellet from St. Paul, we were university buddies. Everybody knows Vital. He's a fixture around here, and he said, he went to the first graduating class. He was in the first graduating class in Université de Moncton, kept tabs with him and stuff. And he said, why don't you apply for law school and you'd be good? So I did. We decided to move on to Moncton. So I went to study law in Moncton, and Joanne started an education degree. And then we came back home to Edmonton. We loved the maritime life, and the Acadian community was fantastic. But, you need to set up where you're from, because your friends and community are there. So we graduated. I graduated in law, came back to Edmonton and set up, practiced law in Edmonton for a while. Didn't pan out in the firm I was with. Went on my own. My friend Vital says, "Why don't you come to St. Paul?" And so I did.
Perfect.
And I'm glad I did. It's been home
Absolutely.
for 20 years. Yeah.
I always have that feel like, guys, that I was almost surprised the one time you told me you grew up in Edmonton. I was like, that doesn't seem right. You're from St. Paul.
Well, thank you, Ben. You know, honestly, Joanne and I feel, this St. Paul is our home. Sometimes we feel like we're not from St. Paul, but we are from
Right.
St. Paul, right? Like,
Yeah,
it
definitely.
warms my heart when you say, people, I didn't know you weren't from St. Paul.
Well,
That's fantastic.
Let's talk a little bit about what gives me that impression. And I said, like, you're so involved with a lot of things. We already talked a little bit about on the more serious side with the reconciliation that you're involved with. But one of the ways we've gotten to know you, well, two ways. We obviously, with me and my wife and our organization of this Iron Horse Ultra, this crazy idea that people should run ultra distances. You hopped on board right away when we started getting involved in that, and we're looking for committee members to help us out with that. But prior to that, and I guess where your experience came in handy was with, and the same reason why we got to know Les Parsons was with the Lakeland Cross Country Ski Club.
Absolutely.
And how that entity basically exists today because of you and your wife Joanne.
Well, thanks, Ben. But you know, Joanne and I mean, skiing. I'll tell you what, Ben. We could go on all kinds of tangents here. I've always been drawn to outdoor sport. I've always been drawn to endurance sport. I've never run distances that you've run, but
More of a shuffle.
you know. But still, you get there. You go from point A to B, and I've skied ski marathons, and Les has been such a good friend and an influence for me as I've gotten to know him. But I'll tell you, Ben, the theme in all of that, I think, is that I need physical activity, I need sport, and I need the outdoors. It's like no coincidence that I've fallen into that pattern in my life of being in the outdoors, sunshine, physical activity. What does that evoke for a lot of people? You know, and we're starting to talk about it.
Right.
It's about mental health, Ben. This has been a key part of my mental and physical health. I've suffered with moments of depression, and I'm drawn to get on my bike. I'm drawn to click into my skis, to lace them up, not as often as you, but I still do, right?
Yes.
Because I need the goodness, the wellness of being outdoors like that. And so skiing has been a big part of what we do in town, Joanne and I. But when Les says in his good heart, well, this must be Pierre and Joanne's club. Pierre and Joanne, we bristle at that because we feel we must not be doing the right thing because we want this to be a community event, just like you and Monique have made the Iron Horse a community event. It can't be Ben and Monique's show because it's not going to work long term.
I get that totally because I say the same thing all the time. Well, it's not us; it's everybody around us that makes it happen. Why we're the focal point of it, but I don't know. But when I say that, or when Les says that about you, it's just because I think people just recognize that there's always that driving force behind it, and it's not so much that you do it for the recognition, you do it because, and people just understand that and appreciate it. So that's why they put that.
Thanks, Ben, for that.
Yeah.
And the same goes with the Iron Horse, right? We know that Ben and Monique's passion is there, right?
Yeah.
So, and you feel that, and I hope people feel that when they see Joanne and I putting in the hours.
We like I said, and I'm sure it's the same for you. We don't do it for the recognition. We do it because we love the event. We love the people that are around it.
Clearly.
And love that they have that opportunity. So whether it's the nice trails for cross-country skiing and all that kind of stuff. So with that being said, so you're the president of the cross-country ski club, correct?
Yeah, president for life.
No matter how much Joanne is pushing to find some sort of conclusion to that term.
I say that with jest because I do need to step back, and this is really I think my last year. But you know, I'll be sitting around and
I just hope they find the right person to take the reins of it, and I feel the same way with the Iron Horse too. Like this change is good, and new ideas and new people and new energy is good for those kinds of organization. So that's
Absolutely.
just, but it doesn't happen until you find the right person too. That's the tough part about it.
And you know, thanks, Ben, for that. And you know, if I can plug what we're doing, Ben, it's a big year for us because we've been unsettled for a few years now,
Right.
moving from site to site.
And that's what I wanted to ask a little bit about too. Like we have these great areas that we can get exposure to in the trails, but it's just finding the right, and you know, for one reason or another, things happen, and with ownership and stuff of property. So where are we looking to? I know, do we still have? We're still going to be doing trails at the golf course here in
Yes,
St.
you
Paul? Okay.
betcha. So the town has been a fantastic
Okay.
partner for us. We're always doing trails at the golf course. We had such a go-getter grooming team last year. We were skiing on both the front and the back nine.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes. We have a new grooming team setting up now.
Okay.
So we're hoping to do as much, have as many kilometers as before. So that, and again, working nicely with the town on that. Our big push now, Ben, is our rural
Yes.
network is going to be at West Cove Recreation Center.
Okay, excellent. That's what I was going to ask, because
Yes.
that's one of my favorite things, because you get just longer trails, a little bit more variation in terrain. Obviously, it's nice at the golf course, but you're fairly flat. There's not a lot of
Yeah,
ups and downs, and you know, the scenery gets repetitive.
it's true.
But it's nice to get out when it, like I said, I would go last year if I had 20-30 minutes in the evening to do a quick little jaunt. And
Yeah.
but you know, on the weekends when you have the time and the daylight and stuff to enjoy those trails. So I'm
Yep.
looking forward to see what transpires with what you guys have lined up.
It's
there.
a transition year. It'll be interesting. We've brand new partnership with the County of St. Paul.
Mm-hmm.
Great people we're working with, very supportive. But it'll be a year where we're trying to figure out where we want to reach out to the snowmobile community in particular. Ben, that's our challenge. People are saying, "Oh, good luck. You guys are going to be running into conflict with the snowmobilers." But you know, thanks to good people in the community like Danny Smill of the Snowmobile Trailblazers,
Right.
who are very supportive of what we're doing. We're hopeful that we're going to avoid misunderstanding, you know, because it's a public area.
Yeah.
So we have to ask snowmobilers to say to accept that this is non-motorized cross-country skiing. Yes, we do need a snowmobile to track set, you know,
Right.
but that's the exception. But we have to make sure people understand that.
And I think, in fairness too, like I know a lot of people involved with the ATV and snowmobile community, and it's for the majority, especially with the organizations like you mentioned with Danny Smill with the Snowmobile Association, everything like that. They're not the ones that really are. We have to convince. There's always that one person that just decides that it's funny to wreck some ski trails and stuff. I know they had issues with that in the Bonneville area with Mural Lake, and it just finished grooming. One person, 20 minutes, wrecks 4 hours of work, and it's not fair to put snowmobilers. It's one person, unfortunately, and I guess that's part of the battle, no matter what. So
yeah, it is the reality. You know, we have to, I think, approach it creatively, Ben,
Yeah.
and say, listen, we're all outdoor sport enthusiasts.
Right.
We can coexist. We just need to respect each other a little bit. I think a lot of snowmobilers, there's been some ill will in some instances where a snowmobiler will say, well, I have a right to be here, and I'm just going over this track because I have a right to be here.
Right.
Now, that's spiteful, but I do think that the majority of snowmobilers just don't really know what those two nice little lines in the snow are. They think, well, maybe that's because they do see a snowmobile track having groomed something, so they just say, oh, well, I'll just go where the first machine went. So
well, hopefully, I mean, like I said, it's I think it's fewer and far between, but for the most part. So I'm looking forward to being a part of that. So
Great,
I think
Ben.
we'll get in our notes there with Lakeland Cross Country Skiing Association and where people can find the trails and maybe how to become more involved, because you guys have been very accommodating. There's now equipment that's up to be rented.
Yeah, and it's been such a real bonus for our club, because thanks to the Lions, we have a nice, modest inventory of skis for rent. We've been able to leverage that to grow the membership of the club.
Right.
So we're encouraging people to buy memberships so they can rent skis and try it out. If they haven't skied before, it's a perfect occasion. And if you've skied before but you just want to get your legs back, going again, buy a membership.
Yeah. Yeah. And a good opportunity to make sure you like it before you invest too much into it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Which is a nice way to kind of get an introduction to it. So like I said, we will go back a little bit here now because we touched on it at the beginning, and I know it's something that's very, very, very important to you. We talked like the truth and reconciliation. This is something that I think has grown in the, I don't want to say the mindset across the country over recent developments and everything like that. But this is something that this you've been a part of for a while and have talked about. Was it part of growing up in the circumstance of your community that drew you in to be a part of this? As it's more about, I guess, getting the two sides more on the same page. If we can say there's sides, I think there's just really part of it is not understanding the other in certain respects. So what drew you into it? And I guess what are the big challenges that you guys are?
What a journey it has been, Ben, and it's a national journey for us and many countries. You know, this segues into so many elements of life for me, Ben. What drew me, I think honestly, God's call. I think sometimes maybe Joanne and I and our family were drawn to St. Paul to make a living practicing law, but also to learn the other reality of Indigenous culture and the importance of that in our country and the importance of Indigenous peoples worldwide. Ben, the world is in trouble. So many issues that we're facing. I'm amazed at the deep spirituality of Indigenous cultures and of the Indigenous people I've had the privilege of getting to know. We're going all over the place, Ben, but I'll tell you what.
It's your show.
You know, I became aware of what reconciliation meant, and the word itself is problematic. The Indigenous brothers and sisters of ours will say, why I don't have to reconcile? Why do we call it reconciliation? And there are so many facets to that. But I believe that a lot can be learned in our journey as a human race on this planet that is in deep trouble with climate change, to learn about human ecology. I think the Pope says this in his encyclical of Laudato Si. He says, where he addresses the importance of environmental change and of preserving the planet. And he says, one of the key things I take away from that encyclical is that the way to accomplish global change in what we're trying to do to save the planet starts with improving and saving human ecology. What is human ecology? I'm still trying to figure out what that is. But it's about looking after the people in their integrity on their land, making sure people have enough to they have work, that they can make a living, that they aren't in overcrowded spaces, that they have the essentials to live a healthy life. And the reconciliation movement is all about that. We recognize the disparity between the standard of living in the Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities. So we've got to address that. And once we create balance, a better human ecology, where people live well and safely and don't have to worry about clean water,
right,
we can then find the way to bigger solutions. It's about relations, Ben. It's about loving each other. And if we start doing that, we'll find a way to love the planet, because we all share the planet.
I just had a bit of an epiphany, and it was more along the lines of we use the word Indigenous to identify a person or culture that's kind of an original resident of the land or the area that they're from. So whether it's our Canadian Indigenous or anywhere's on the planet.
Yep.
But aren't we all indigenous to
We're
this
all
one?
indigenous. Thank you, Ben. You got it exactly right. I mean, our indigenous brothers and sisters. I wish we didn't have to say indigenous on indigenous. We should say all of us.
Well, yeah.
We should say
Yeah.
my relations. We share the land, and there's nothing more fundamental to indigenous culture, as I understand it, as I'm starting to understand it, as the land that supports and that we all have in common. We think in terms of our country. That's non-indigenous thinking, right?
Right.
Our country, our community, you know. But what we have in common is the land, the sky, the water, right? So
Right.
the land is such a fundamental concept.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to wrap it up here.
Already?
Well, I like to leave a little bit of the door open because I think this is something we're going to have to revisit because it's an ongoing, everything's ongoing. The ski club, your career.
I'm trying to retire.
Yeah.
I'm not succeeding very well.
And then I think another important facet is we will have to have your wife Joanne on at some point here if she's. I think she'd be open to it. She's always game for something new and something different, I guess too. And like you said, a musician performer. So this is just another.
Joanne would love to be here.
Awesome. So with that being said, because I asked this question now, you cannot say Joanne, but as someone who I find completely interesting, who would you recommend to have on this show as someone completely interesting that you think you'd like to hear?
I'm going to say something right off the top of my head here, Ben.
Perfect.
Everybody in town knows Ray. Have you seen Ray? Ray has a wagon.
Yes.
He walks in town. This man, when I'm off to the office, I see him leaving his house with his hand wagon, and he's bundled up, whether it's 20 below, and he's ready to go. It's this man. I would love to hear his story about what gets him up in the morning. What does he walk for? What does he think when he walks? How do people see him? And what story he has to say? I'm afraid I don't know Ray's last name. I just know him as Ray.
And I didn't even know his name. I know exactly who you're talking about. He has the wagon. He cleans up garbage. He picks up bottles.
Right. I'm embarrassed. I should know his last name. He's a human being.
Well, yeah.
But I don't know him other than Ray.
I see him as I'm driving down the street and he's walking down the street. I've never had an opportunity. You wave or whatever, right?
Exactly.
Okay. We'll find out.
I'll help you.
Okay.
I'll stop him and I'll have a chat. I'll be the reporter on the street.
And
for
then,
you.
let's find out if he's willing to sit down and do a podcast with us.
Let's try.
Because that is fascinating right now. Who is this? Who is Ray and what's his last name for starters? Thank you so much, Pierre Lamoureux. Again, as a member of the Committee for Reconciliation, is there any way people can track down information if they want to get involved that you want to share with us?
Sure, thanks, Ben. Oh boy, I think if you Google Reconciliation St. Paul,
okay,
and you'll find we have a Facebook page.
Okay,
and we try to get together now virtually for the time being every second Thursday.
Okay.
So please do get a hold of us. All we do is we create circles of dialogue to better understand each other, to better communicate, and to talk about the reality of what we can do to improve our relations in our community.
All right. Okay. And then as well, the Lakeland Cross Country Ski Club. Get involved. Get yourself a little bit of health and mental wellness out there, and some beautiful areas in this area that you can enjoy. Simply by doing that. So once again, I want to very much thank my guest, Pierre Lamoureux, for joining me.
Thank you, Ben.
Someone completely interesting. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please make sure you subscribe to your favorite podcast provider. Give us a like and a share. You can find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, by searching Poolin Radio or Now for Someone Completely Interesting. And as always, he has been just that, Pierre Lamoureux.